Hello? Oh, hi there. Andre Never Going to Sleep back with another video. Bear with me as I am currently testing out some funky new microphone settings some guy on YouTube recommended me to use. Hopefully I sound better than my previous videos, and I'd love to hear some feedback if you can actually tell a difference. Well, anyway, welcome back to the very last category of the Azur Lane April tier list explanation, the Submarines. I promised this video would be short, so let's jump straight into some submarine basics. Now, unlike any other ship category in Azur Lane, the submarines are very directed towards the endgame because they have numerous requirements in order to make them used effectively. I would not recommend directing your resources towards them until you are clearing chapters 12 or 13. Now, first of all, for this complaint is that they are heavily gear reliant, meaning that they will be able to function exceptionally better if they have the best possible loadout than compared to lower rarity equipment. Now, as you would know, the gold torpedoes would function much better than purple, and purple would function much better than blue. This kind of rarity is amplified for submarines because their differences are super big depending on how much good equipment they have on them. And all this good gear would of course take forever for them to get, because you can only do 2 submarine runs per week, and you can't even run the harder stages if you don't have proper equipment to go and beat the bosses with. The second factor is that they take a very long time to level up, because the most efficient way to level up a submarine is easily putting them in the dorms and also doing the 1200 oil commission. Doing battles for them barely gives any extra XP, and it's really more of a hassle than anything else. If they're not leveled up to enough to at least level 70 or 100 at max limit break, they will definitely deal a lot less damage and will probably not be worth it for a good player. Now, this is why I would not recommend focusing these submarines for newer players, because the cost of raising them is a lot more than the benefits for most of the game. The final thing is actually not really a stat or kind of raising thing, it's just because they are mostly event locked. As you can see from this tier list, almost all of them except for 2 of them in the current build pool are permanent, being U81 over here and I-19. U47 says that she is permanent, but that's not true. She is permanent on the Chinese and Japanese server, but not the American one yet. Now, these are almost all event ships, so that most of these people are not worth getting if you don't have a super rare version of them. I would not recommend leveling up most of these purple ships, because once you get a gold one, you are definitely going to want to use them over any of these purple submarines, because the gold ones are literally just better, as you can see from the tier list. The gold ones are up here in tier 0 through tier 2, and none of the purple ones ever cross over to the gold territory, making them a lot better if you have the super rare ones. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not trying to put down the submarine class in any way. I just want the community to be aware that they are not a big priority for most of the game. They are extremely good once they have all of their needs fulfilled, however, and they have definitely helped me greatly in clearing some difficult stages. Now, finally, with that all out of the way, it is time for this very brief tier list. Now, I'm mostly going to cover these 3 ships in tier 0 right here. Well, they're actually not ships, they're submarines, but you get the point. They are the 3 Wolfpack Ironblood Super Rare U-boats. Now, they're in tier 0 because of their superior stats for being better than a purple elite ship. They are super rare. And also because of their Wolfpack skills that are basically only U-boat German buffs that, as an allusion to the Wolfpack hunting strategy used in World War II by these subs, would actually benefit all of them. So if you have these 3, you should definitely be using them together, as their skills get better for the more Ironblood submarines in the fleet. They are easily the best fleet you can possibly form with the submarines at this moment of time. And as a disclaimer, when these submarines are all together, they have very similar damage potential, so their rankings in tier 0 don't really matter too much. If you have all 3 of them, just use them all together. It's not like one is objectively better than the other. But either way, I'm going to give some individual reviews for all of them now. U101 is objectively better than all of these 2 because she has a Wolfpack skill, as I've said it earlier, that gives her 7% extra evasion rate and damage to destroyers and cruisers But this thing is that her Wolfpack skill grants it to the rest of the Ironblood submarines as well, while the rest of these Fire Wolfpack ones are not global submarine buffs. They're only for a certain person. So, along with that, she also increases her torpedo and reload by 6% for every other Ironblood submarine in the fleet. This is why it's so important that you guys have all of these Ironblood submarines all together, because their Wolfpack skills greatly increase their buffs and stuff for the more submarines that are in the fleet that are Ironblood. She is the only buffer to the rest of the fleet out of these three, as I said earlier, and she also has another skill that increases her accuracy by 15%, but it's not really that big of a deal. The rest of it's just focused on her global buff to the submarine fleet. Now U-47 is in second because of her one skill that is called the Bull of Scapa Flow that increases her torpedoes' damage by 40% for the next 5 seconds after she hits an enemy with a torpedo. Now basically, without all that weird jazz, the first torpedo has no extra damage buff, but for the next 5 seconds after, she will be able to hit the enemies for basically 50% extra damage per extra torpedo landed. Now this skill resets every single time an enemy is hit, meaning that it will be active for basically the whole time that she is launching torpedoes. She actually does not have a Wolfpack buff, but just because her skill is so good, she actually beats out the last German U-boat right here. She also has a second skill called Lone Wolf that encourages you to put her alone in the submarine fleet, but please do not do this. More submarines are actually better than just her by herself. So just overshadow this buff, don't even level it up, it's not worth doing. Just put 3 submarines in if you have 3, and you will definitely be doing much more damage than only putting U-47 in. Now the final person in tier 0 is U-81, who has very solid abilities, and her Wolfpack skill only buffs her. Now that increases evasion by 40%, which doesn't really matter, since they will be under the sea most of the time, being a submarine. And it also increases her torpedo, reload, and accuracy for every additional Ironblood submarine. Now, this is very good, and it also increases with her extra skill that buffs her damage to carriers by 20%, which is very useful in Chapter 13. She also has a 15% chance to inflict additional flooding damage, but even with all these cool perks combined that give her equal potential to U-47, whose single buff for the Bull of Scapa Flow thing is just much better. Now, the only time I would ever consider leveling up an elite submarine is to get that extra Wolfpack buff that U-101 or U-81 have. But other than that, just stick with using super rare submarines if you do have them. So the rest of this tier list is pretty simple, so I won't really be going over any of the other ones in full detail. So here's your too long didn't read if you don't really want to listen to this whole video. If you have any of the tier 0 or tier 1 submarines, use them over any of the other people. Actually, tier 0, tier 1, and tier 2. If you have a super rare ship, use them over your elite ships, obviously. If you have Albacore and Cavalla? I don't know. Well, use them together. These two buff each other, and they are very good together. Now, I-13 is not in the game yet, don't worry about her, and the rest of the 3 super rare ships have very equal performance. Minato Aqua, I-168, and I-19. They all have different flavors of skills, but they mostly do same damage output. Now, this concludes my much shorter guide to the usual time for submarines, and it also wraps up the tier list explanation for April. I'll be now moving on to different content, and that might take me a little bit longer to make those videos, so I am sorry if there is a drop in upload consistency. Other than that, as always, like and subscribe if you found my videos helpful. These videos take a long time for me to make, and I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. Now feel free to leave a comment for any ship-related questions that you would like answered. I'll do my very best to reply to all of them. And with that all said, have a great good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace, guys.